We're going to take a look at Esri's ArcGIS Pro version 2 with an emphasis on some of the features that would be useful for utilities. This is really going to just be a small subset of the overall capabilities that are in Esri, but I thought it would at least give you an idea of what could be done out of the box and how this might differ from other GIS packages. So we're taking a look at a sample electric system map that I've been working with, and I'm zoomed out so you can kind of get a feel for what an overview of the system map might look like. And just like with a lot of other packages, I can start to zoom in and get closer into some of the features. You might notice that some of the formatting does change a little bit. It's one of the features of Esri and how it can be dynamic as you zoom around. And I'm going to go and actually select a bookmark to get to a particular area. So I just clicked on bookmarks and I went to Pleasant Valley. So Pleasant Valley is a subdivision that I've been working on, and I know I was going to come back to it multiple times over the next couple weeks, so I created that bookmark so I can just easily get back to that location on the map and also that exact zoom level. So the zoom levels are very important because that really dictates kind of the formatting and the look and the feel of the map, and you'll see a bunch of different examples of that as I go through some of the features of ArcGIS Pro. And so just take a look at some of the features here. We've got some of these solid lines that represent overhead conductor. The triangles are transformers or transformer banks. The circles represent different types of poles, and the squares are different types of services. And so you might have noticed too that there is a base map that has some of these kind of the parcels kind of outlined here. We've got some like trees and shrubs and things that are showing up. So that's the topographic base map that's provided by Esri. You can easily switch to other base maps, so I just clicked on the base map button there, and let's say we wanted to look at an imagery map so we can see kind of some satellite footage of that same location, or we could go into the OpenStreetMaps, which is an open source map that is available as well, so it gives you a different look and feel than what we were looking at just a little bit ago. But I like to work with the topographic map, so we're going to go switch back to that. Or you can go with no map at all just by taking out the checkbox there next to the base map. So one of the things that's really important about Esri, at least with the newer versions, is that the map is really a database. And so what that means is that you are storing not just the features and their locations and what they are, but also the data attributes all in the same place, all in a single database format. In this case, we're using Microsoft SQL Server to do that, and that gives us a lot of various benefits to working with it, such as being able to have different views of the same map data. So when you start working with ArcGIS Pro, you create a project file. The project file can have links to various different databases that represent these different maps, and you can also have different maps that look at that map data in different ways, so that formatting the view can change. So to give you an example here, I'm going to switch over to this phase review map that I created. So this map I designed specifically so that I can check out the phasing on the map. And so maybe normally I don't want to see all of this additional information, so every one of these features has a phase value listed, and I also added directional arrows to show how the electricity is flowing. And so by looking at this very quickly, I can see, does something look like it's not right? I can see if there's a problem, and I can easily correct that if that's the case. I also, by default, took out the base map because I just wanted to just see a clean view of this part of the system map, and that's going to help me actually see if there's going to be any problems or not with the phasing that we're taking a look at. So the key thing here to note is if I do make a change here, it's going to affect the other map we were just looking at. And I've got a third map here, which I call Neon Black, which I mostly just did for fun to show a completely different look and feel. So notice that the background is black. I use kind of neon colors for a lot of these attributes here, or the features that you're seeing, and I use some different symbols. I just made the whole thing look very, very different than the other two maps that you looked at. So another thing that I wanted to point out too is I set something called a reference scale for this particular map. So notice as I get closer in and I'm zooming in further and further, the features are getting larger and larger. So this is basically kind of fixing the scale of the features so that they're not dynamically adjusting like the other two maps did just a little bit ago. And so this is going to be more similar to how a drawing type of package would work, to where you're really laying things out, and you don't want things to really be very dynamic. You want them to be just very fixed. So the nice thing about Esri is you can have a mode that's like that while still having other maps that are more dynamic in nature and might have some different purposes. So anyways, let's go back to the system map, and I'm going to go right back to that same spot. Actually, we're going to go to a different spot on the map, slightly different location here. Working with data associated to features in Esri is easy to do. So let's start by selecting a service. And so you can see that it was highlighted here on the map. And then over on the right in this attributes window, it's showing that there is a service point that's selected. So down below in this window under attributes, it's showing all of the data values that are available for that particular feature that was selected. On the left hand side you see a list of all the field names, and it gives you a little bit of information about each one of those. And then on the right are the actual values that are associated to that particular field. To change a value, you simply click inside of the text box or drop down, and then you can just simply click on something to change it. It's really just that easy to do. Let's take a look also at doing multiple changes at one time. So to do that, I'm actually going to select a larger area here, and notice that everything that is inside of that selection rectangle has now been highlighted. And so that highlighting is helping us to see exactly what's selected from the map perspective, but we can also go into this attributes window and we can see those same items that have been selected from the perspective of this, this field or attribute window that we're working with. And so let's say I wanted to work with just the street lights. I can click on the first one there, and I'm going to shift click on the last one and then right click and say only select this. So now everything else was deselected and I only have just my street lights selected. So what I want to do now is I want to change who owns these particular street lights. So right now it's saying that it's owned by the utility. So I'm going to click on that, and I really want to change that to say that the city owns these. So if you notice here that the city option isn't available to us. And so in order to be able to change that, we have to be able to actually add to this drop-down list. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. To change the drop-down list values, I'm going to right-click over here on this device option and go to Design and then Domains. So the drop-down lists are called domains in Esri, and so when you get to this particular screen, it's going to list all the different domains or drop-down lists that are available. And so I'm just going to scroll through here and find the one that we need, which is the owner list. And this is going to show the ones that we saw just a second ago, the cable, phone, unknown, and utility. So I'm going to enter in our new value, which we said was city. And then I'm just going to click on the Save button, and it'll add this particular option to the list of all the available owned by values that we saw just a second ago. And it's going to take a little bit to save that. So we can close that and go back, and now I can go back to the owned by drop-down list, and there it is. So now we have city as an option, so I can select that, and because I had all of these streetlights selected, now they will all be switched over to owned by the city. So if I click on these individually, you'll see that each one of those, you can see the asset ID changing, and you can see that they all say city. So now what if we wanted to add an entirely new field that we didn't currently have available to us. So we can do that just as easily as well. So let's go back to device here, and I'm going to go to design, and this time I'm going to select fields. So if I click on fields, it's going to show me all the fields that we just saw in the attributes window a little bit ago. So this is the whole list going on down, and all you have to do is go and click where it says click here to add, and say I type in the word test field, and you can give it an alias so it has a slightly different name as far as what you see in the window versus what is in the database. And you tell it the type of data type, so I have integers or fractional values like this double or float, dates, pure text, different options like that. And so we'll just say this is a text field, and then if it's a text field you can also say how long that field is. So let's say we want it to be 50 characters. So from there you just click on the save button, and that's going to add that new field option to the list of attributes, and you can start using it from there. So now that we've added our new field and we've assigned also that city value to the owned by for that previous set of streetlights, so what can we do with some of that data? So let's take a look. I'm going to close this down, and I'm not going to save this, so let's cancel that out. And we still have our same streetlights selected right now. I'm going to deselect those, so now those are no longer highlighted. And now we're going to do a query against some of the data attributes. And so we'll do that by using a feature that is called a definition query. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit first so that we can get a little bit bigger of a view of the map. And I'll center that a little bit. So this little area here is where we just changed the owned by of the streetlights to city. And so now we're going to create a definition query that will show us how we can query just for those particular streetlights. So I'm going to right click on device, because streetlight is a type of device, and I'm going to go to properties, and then I'm going to click on definition query. So we have basically a very powerful query engine that's very similar to tools like Microsoft Access and other querying type tools that allow you to select fields and enter in operators and provide criteria. So let's take a look at the fields. This is the same set of fields that you saw previously in the attributes list. So I'm going to say owned by, and then by default it says is equal to, but you have other options as well. And it's going to go, I'm going to enter in a value. Now before, because we added city to our domains, now city becomes an option here in my query window, so I can just click on city and then say add. So maybe it's possible that there's also some other different types of features that are also owned by city, but what I really want is just to see the street light. So I'm going to add another clause here and see how it has the word and here. So I'm going to leave that, so it's going to say it's going to include the owned by is equal to city, and this new part of the query, which is going to be asset group, is equal to, and we're going to say street light, and we're going to add that as well. So now I'm going to say OK, and notice what happened was we had a bunch of street lights in this part of the map, and those are all gone, and the only thing left is just the street lights that match that criteria. So I just have street lights that if I click on one of these here, you'll see that the owned by is equal to city, which is what we told it to do. And so this is a extremely powerful querying engine capability that can lead to all kinds of possibilities. And remember, just like before, we were also able to add a new field ourselves just using the built-in Esri tools. So if there are other things that you might want to be able to query on down the line, you don't even have to think of those now. You can add those later and then populate those values in the future as well, and then be able to use that to do these types of queries, all without having to go back to a programmer and request that. This is all stuff that you can do, or if you are working with somebody, it can be done for you, and it can be done very easily and very quickly. The next thing we're going to do is start working with the features directly on the map to actually lay out a little bit more of the system. So I'm going to go to a new spot here, and it's open, so I know I've got some room to work with, and I have it at a certain zoom level, kind of closer in than what I might normally do when I'm just simply looking at stuff on the map. To create a new feature, we're going to first click on the Edit menu and then click on the Create button. And so that changed this left panel over here to say Create Features, and it's going to show us all the different features that are available to be added to this particular map. So the symbols here are completely flexible. So you can add your own symbols, you can use a sample set such as this, and then just modify those to fit your particular needs. Whatever is the easiest thing for you can be done. It's very flexible as far as how this works, and we're going to look at that in a little more detail in just a little bit. So let's say I wanted to add a pole here. Let me just find that. Okay, we got a pole. And so I can just click on the primary pole and then click on the spot on the map where I want that to go. And if I wanted to do more poles, I can just copy those. So I'm just going to place more of the same one there. And if I want to change some values for those, I can just draw a rectangle around those, and I can set values very simply by highlighting those in the attributes list. And then say I want to do the district, a city, owned by the utility, maintained by the utility, etc. So it happens to be common values. You can easily set those all together. And so you might want to see also as far as the placement of some of these. Did I get those exactly where I wanted, or maybe the distance apart you wanted to check? So Esri provides a measure tool. So I clicked on map and I went to measure and clicked on that. And that allows me to check the measurements between different locations on the map. So I wanted these to be about 100 feet apart, and so it looks like I got pretty close there. And so just by dragging this out, I can then measure, and I can see what those distances are in feet. So that's just one of the handy tools they have available. So let's exit that, and I want to actually start drawing some conductor now. So I'm going to click on primary overhead, and I can just draw that out. I'm just going to do a sample line here, and it'll do that. If you look at the tool palette below, which has all these different line options, this gives us other things that we can do with a line tool that are pretty flexible. So I can do a right angle line. It'll make that easier to do than just simply trying to draw that out. I can also do curves, and so if I select one of these various curving tools, let me just select this one here, then you can see that it can do the pretty flexible kind of circular curve option here, or I can get even more creative with this other curve tool that lets me kind of set different angles and things, and I can kind of mess around with exactly how I want to get that curve. So it's very flexible. You can also do basically a freeform line, and notice too that these lines are actually in multiple segments, and so a single line can be represented by multiple segments on the map, and so it's still considered to be a single feature. So if I was completed with that, I could hit this green checkbox here to say finish, or I think I'm just going to hit cancel in this particular case, since I don't want to save that. Also a really nice feature is this snapping tool. So if I click on snapping, I can see that snapping is turned on. So if I want to turn that off, I can just click that button. So I'll turn that back on, and there's various different types of snapping options. So I think I've got most of these turned on here. So when I go and draw out my primary overhead, and I want it to snap to these particular poles. So if you notice that when I hit the pole, you saw it highlighted, it showed what it was, and I can go click on that, and it says it's telling me that's doing a point type of a snap, so that's how it figured out what to do there. So now when I get to this other one, I can just do the same thing and click on it, and then I can say green checkbox to complete that. And so let's see here, I can do another line as well, starting with the same spot I was at, and then I can go to the new location. So that time I just did a double click, and that does the same thing as hitting that green checkbox does. It just accepts that particular line segment. So let's also add a transformer here. So I'm going to do actually a transformer bank in this case. So I'm going to click on overhead transformer bank. And if I wanted to, I could have it snap right onto the pole. That's an option if you want to be able to do that. Or I can have it be offset a little bit. So let's say I want it to be just right next to it. I can just click and that's it. It can take care of that particular feature and stick it right where I wanted it to. And so another thing you can do too is if you have some segments that are going to be need to be replicated. Let's say you've got a subdivision, you've got a bunch of street lights or something like that. You can highlight multiple items here and you can copy and paste. So I've got two things there, and I can then use the keyboard to do a copy, or I could use the copy command, that. And so now I've got another copy of that, and I can just move that where I want to. If you look down below on this tool palette, you can see that there are things like rotate, so I can rotate that to get that how I want. And it's got some nice features for being able to make that the placement a little bit easier. So say I wanted it to be more like this, and I was going to extend this out, I could modify it to be in that different configuration. So there are some other ways you can mark up the map that I wanted to show. So to do that, let's go to a different part of the map. So I'm going to go to the bookmarks and go to new construction. And we will take a look at a new, oops, not new construction. I actually want to go to this to be reviewed section. So let's do that. And we will turn on the markup tools so that you can see what some of the markup can look like. There is a layer that I set up previously called Bright Map Notes, and that's a built-in feature of Esri. So I turned that layer on, and you can see how different parts of the markup then showed up. So this green rectangle with this text, this arrow that runs along here is also showing up with this text, and then these blue stars showed up saying review phase. And so there's a bunch of these different markup tools that are like this, and these can all be modified too. You can have these be in any colors. There's all kinds of different shapes. You can do lines, you can do rectangles, the arrows, things like that are all possible. And because we have our great query tools, which you saw before, you can also query to be able to find these on the map as well. But these are designed to really stick out. And what I've done in this particular example is this was a part of the map that I needed to do certain things on. And so I wanted to mark up this area to really say, hey, I need to change this from secondary wire to streetlight wire. And then same with this area along here. There's a bunch of streetlights that should have a different type of wire that are set. So I can do that very easily later on, but I wanted to make sure I mark this so I can come back to it. And then this area here where the blue stars are is telling me to review the phasing here, because there's some concern that I might have some things that are not set correctly. So maybe it's the transformers, maybe it's a wire, maybe the services themselves, whatever happens to be. I can then come back to that and I can take a look at it and figure out what happens to be the main problem with that. So so basically that gives you an idea of some of the markup that can be done. It's very flexible. When I zoom out, it kind of stands out, especially like the stars. They stay that same size, and so that you really can see those easily on the map. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is looking at some more of the symbology. And so we will go to a new spot on the map, and we will take a look at what you can do with that. I'm going to now switch back over to our Pleasant Valley subdivision, and we're going to take a look at how some of the symbology can be changed. I'm going to click over to the contents window, and this is going to show me all the different symbols that are available, and I want to change the symbology for the overhead transformer bank, so I'm just going to click on that. And then over on the right hand side, it's going to go into this symbology window, which allows me to adjust all of the entire appearance of that particular symbol. So we have things like the color and the size. These are the shapes that are involved. So this is actually comprised of two different shapes. And so I can change each one of those. You can see the color of the main object and the outline, the width of the outline. A variety of other different types of things can be changed about the symbol as well. So I'm going to do something really simple here. I'm just going to change the color. So I've clicked on the triangle symbol. I went to the color option. I'm just going to change that to, let's change it to, I don't know, this pink color here. And I'm going to change the outline as well. And I'm also going to change the other symbol, this hexagon shape that goes around it. So we'll leave that white in the center, and then change the outline to that same pink color. And then I just say apply. And that's really all you have to do. So the update itself everywhere it has an overhead symbol for the transformer bank. It's going to change those ones to pink. We do have an underground transformer bank as well, and those are currently blue, and those haven't been touched because I didn't modify it. So that's just one simple example of changing the color. Let's actually change a symbol. So I'm going to go down and see my primary poles here. I'm going to click on that, and then it's showing me the current symbol that I have right here. It's just a simple circle. And I'm going to change its symbol by going into this font area. And Esri provides a bunch of existing symbols through font packages that are available through ArcGIS Pro. So here's just one of the examples. If I scroll through the list, there's standard fonts, of course, but if you get down to the Esri ones, you can see all these are symbol-based fonts. And so each one of those has its own set. So I've got one already selected here, Esri IGL font 25. And let's just say I want to make this into a star, something entirely different than the circle symbol. So I'm going to click on that. And let's say I want to change the colors to red. I'm going to do the core color plus the outline color. So you can see it changing here, so that's more of a red color. Then I'm going to also change the size. So I'm going to go and set this to 24 to make it big enough here for us to see. And this bar here allows you to change the sizing based on the zoom level. And so this is close to the current zoom level, so I'm going to just change it there. Normally I would also change it in the other spots as well, just so that you'd have more of a gradual change in the size. So all I have to do now is click on the apply button, and now all those have changed into red stars. And that's really it. To be able to change the symbol itself. Of course, you can also do entirely unique symbols as well. Any kind of vector-based graphic should be able to be imported into Esri. They do recommend using fonts if possible. It's a little bit faster as far as the display part of it, but if you do need to go outside of the standard symbols, you can do that just as easily by creating your own. Esri's labeling capabilities are extremely flexible. We're going to take a look at a couple of different approaches, one using the labeling technology itself, and then there's another one called annotations. And so if you look at this particular map, you'll see that we have a number of the features labeled. So this transformer is showing the phase and the voltage. The pedestals here are showing their station numbers. The services are showing the number of units being served. And so that's just an example of some of the things that can be done. You can also turn labeling on and off for various different types of features. You can control the placement of the labeling. So I have some distance here between this transformer and the label that I specifically set. How it displays in relationship to the feature is also something that can be controlled. So I told this one specifically to be in the upper right hand corner. That's the default location. And other ones like this pedestal, I want it to be slightly or straight above potentially. And you can also have it dynamically pick other locations if labels were to end up colliding with each other. So if you look at this particular screen, you won't see any labels that actually go right on top of each other. This is all completely done dynamically, and as I zoom in and out, let me just back up a little bit here, you'll see things adjust slightly to try to maximize the label's readability and visibility, including in this case, kind of doing some two-line types of things to adjust itself to make it a little bit more clear and more easy to read. So that's just one of the options. With annotations, you can be more specific and set as far as how you want things to be displayed, and we'll show an example of that in just a little bit. But let's dive into the actual changing of the symbols themselves, excuse me, of the labels themselves. So I'm going to go into this label section, and now I'm in the labeling window here. And right now I have some labels for wire that I want to turn on. So I'm just going to click on the wire labels, and I could have multiple classes of labels if I wanted to. This is just one simple example. And this goes back to the previous map that we showed for phase labeling, that we wanted all the conductor to show its phase. So that's what this is doing currently. But if I go into the actual labeling properties themselves, we can start to make change to that. So first off, the section here is saying what should I actually show on the label. So I can use any of the fields that are available to me. I can also put in my own little bits of code here, so I can combine things. I can do things like, in this case, or if this, then do this, types of expressions that make it more complex and more capable, as opposed to just doing the phase like I have listed here. So this part itself can get incredibly dynamic if that's desired. So if I click over on the SQL, just like before when we did that definition query and we had it show us just one type of feature, you can do the same thing here. I can say add clause, I can pick any of my fields, I can really say I want the labeling properties to apply to just this one particular type of feature in this particular case. And so in this case I'm saying I want just the primary underground ones to have their label displayed. And so as soon as I apply this, if you look at some of these secondary ones that are showing up here, as soon as I apply it, those ones will all go away, and only the primary undergrounds will still be displayed. And so I can do very complex types of queries, and I can have different queries then display different types of labeling based on whatever those data elements are. So I'm going to take that out and go back to where we had it here, just to make things a little bit more clear, and as far as when I make changes. And then this other part is the visibility range, and so that's another aspect of the dynamic nature of Esri Maps that is really useful. So I can tell it that I only want labeling to show up when I am in a certain zoom level. And so right now I have it so that when it's zoomed in at the very most, it's not going to try to do any kind of limitation there. But as I start to go further out, I zoom out, then this 5,000 zoom level will kick in. So right now we're at 750, and if I start to zoom out a ways, I get to a certain point. So let me go outside of 5,000, and as soon as it finishes redrawing itself, you'll see these lines here, that labeling all went away. So that's just an example of how that can be controlled, and so you can get that to really be exactly how you want it. It's really, in some cases, certain levels of zoom combined with labeling can be a little bit cluttered, and you can just adjust that and get that exactly how you want. So let's take a look at some of the other options here. There's the symbols themselves, so I can change things like the size of the text very easily. So let's make that 14 point, and let's say I wanted it to be bold, and I can say apply, and then you can see this large bold text appears. I can change the font to something else. Let's use this Technic, and then let's say I wanted the color to be this orange color, so I can just apply that, and you can see that. There's a Technic bold. That was actually possible too, but anyway, so any kind of formatting changes you want to make, font, size, style, etc., is really easy to do. You can do underlines if you want. There's italics if the font supports italics. If you just scroll through this list here, you can see all these different things. There's offsets of the text from the features as far as how close things are to one another. So all that is possible. Let's take the underlying off of there, and let's go back to let's do Arial here. Yeah, it looks a little bit better. I'll leave it as bold orange for now. And I click on this other option here. There's some additional formatting things as far as the spacing, whether you want kerning turned on, the way it handles hyphenation and how it does text wrapping. All of that is under your control. Another key one is positioning. So right now I have it set to regular placement, and then I have this centered horizontal option selected. But let me change some of these so you can see what those do. So let's do centered perpendicular. So that changes it. And that way, we can do this curved option. You can do offset horizontal, offset straight. So these are just different positioning mechanisms that are available. There's a different set that are available for point features like pedestals and poles and transformers that let you change the positioning around the actual feature, and you can tell it by default you want it to be in a certain spot unless it would collide with something, in which case you can move it to the next best position that you want. You can control that order and how that works on the offset away from the feature all very, very easily. So that's just kind of built into the system, just out of the box Esri as far as how that works. There's a bunch of other controls here that control what happens when things do collide. We won't get into that. And even things like duplicate labels, when say you have two wires running into each other, you can control whether or not you want it to remove the duplication or not. Things on those lines are very intricate levels of control that are available. So that probably about covers it for the labeling as far as just a brief introduction to what's possible there. I'm going to switch over to a different map here, and we're going to take a look at annotation. Annotations are text-based features that can be placed on a map, very similar to how you place a symbol-based feature. A couple examples here. We have a annotation that's just a free-form, standalone title here. And then down below here, we have this as a marker symbol. So this is actually a feature, a symbol feature. And this text is actually associated to it. So if I move it up a little bit here and click OK on that, then you'll see it readjust itself, and it basically will follow the feature around as it moves around the map. This also shows an example too of doing a multicolored annotation. So I did different colors of text, even mixing and matching colors on the same line. This free-form annotation here is doing the same thing, where it's getting data from the, actually this one was just a hard-coded label here that's showing just multi-line, multi-color capabilities with a different font size. So let's take a look at just creating a brand new annotation. So I'm going to go and click on Create, and I've got a class called Class 1 that I already had set up. And so I'm just going to change the text to sample text. So I'm going to then place it on the map, and the classes of labels, or excuse me, for annotations, allow default settings like the size and the font and things like that, but you can also change it after the fact. So I place sample text, and if you noticed over here on the right, it has it selected, so it's selected up here, and then I can now change some of this information that's in here. So I could change font size and make it bigger. I can change the color to purple here. I can change this to bold. I can change the font, etc. And so all those kind of things are possible. And you can also do things like rotating the text. So let me select that here, and let's do modify and rotate. So I'm going to click on that, and so now I can rotate that around if I want to. So I can do that, and we'll say OK to that. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the flexibility. So you can really do a lot of things with the formatting capabilities, placement, how it's associated to a feature. those kind of things are all possible. So a lot of times I use headings just to indicate parts of the map, like maybe a district or an area that I want to indicate. But if you want, you can always use it for adding additional information to features as well. So like we did in this case, we created an annotation that is, tied to this particular marker, so it can be its own unique indicator of some text that describes it. So there's a few other things on this particular map that I wanted to mention. So here we have some poles, these 3 items, and I changed the labeling to actually put a little bit of code behind it so that by default it's going to do the pole number. It's going to label it that way. If there is some custom text behind the scenes, it's going to display that instead. So let me show how that works. So you select it, and then I've got a, let's see, where is it? Some notes in here. There it is. Label text. So if you change that, then it'll update the label there. And then on this one at the very bottom here, we just cleared out the custom text so that it would be just blank. So there could be different reasons why you'd want to label things and override the default labeling, but that just gives you some ideas on how that can be done and how easy it is to do as well. Over here we also have some symbols where I've adjusted the size of the symbol, so just showing some possibilities there. And then here I use this symbol, this T symbol here is what I use for guy wires, and I'm just rotating it at pretty small degrees of incrementing here. So you can do it actually in 1 degree increments, so it gets to be very precise as far as the rotation goes. So that about covers all of the basic Esri functionality that's out of the box that I wanted to demonstrate for you today. Obviously I've only just touched the surface of what's possible, but at least this will give you an idea of some of the things that can be done, and there's a lot more to explore and a lot more that can occur. They have a lot of educational materials that you can take a look at, as well as classes and certifications and things, so you can get more familiar with Esri. And really most of what you saw today is pretty easy to learn. It didn't take me very long to learn, and it's something that, that you could pretty easily learn as well. Annotations are text-based features that can be placed on a map, very similar to how you place a symbol-based feature. A couple examples here. We have a annotation that's just a free-form, standalone title here. And then down below here, we have this as a marker symbol. So this is actually a feature, a symbol feature. And this text is actually associated to it. So if I move it up a little bit here and click OK on that, then you'll see it readjust itself, and it basically will follow the feature around as it moves around the map. This also shows an example too of doing a multicolored annotation. So I did different colors of text, even mixing and matching colors on the same line. This freeform annotation here is doing the same thing, where it's getting data from the, actually this one was just a hard-coded label here that's showing just multi-line, multi-color capabilities with a different font size. So let's take a look at just creating a brand new annotation. So I'm going to go and click on Create, and I've got a class called Class 1 that I already had set up. And so I'm just going to change the text to sample text. So I'm going to then place it on the map, and the classes of labels, or excuse me, for annotations, allow default settings like the size and the font and things like that, but you can also change it after the fact. So I place sample text, and if you noticed over here on the right, it's has it selected, so it's selected up here, and then I can now change some of this information that's in here. So I could change font size and make it bigger. I can change the color to purple here. I can change this to bold. Can change the font, etc. And so all those kind of things are possible. And you can also do things like rotating the text. So let me select that here, and let's do modify and rotate. So I'm going to click on that, and so now I can rotate that around if I want to. So I can do that, and we'll say OK to that. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the flexibility. So you can really do a lot of things with the formatting capabilities, placement, how it's associated to a feature. Those kind of things are all possible. So a lot of times I use headings just to indicate parts of the map, like maybe a district or an area that I want to indicate. But if you want, you can always use it for adding additional information to features as well. So like we did in this case, we created an annotation that is, tied to this particular marker, so it can be its own unique indicator of some text that describes it. So there's a few other things on this particular map that I wanted to mention. So here we have some poles, these 3 items, and I changed the labeling to actually put a little bit of code behind it so that by default it's going to do the pole number. It's going to label it that way. If there is some custom text behind the scenes, it's going to display that instead. So let me show how that works. So you select it, and then I've got a, let's see, where is it? Some notes in here. There it is. Label text. So if you change that, then it'll update the label there. And then on this one at the very bottom here, we just cleared out the custom text so that it would be just blank. So there could be different reasons why you'd want to label things and override the default labeling, but that just gives you some ideas on how that can be done and how easy it is to do as well. Over here we also have some symbols where I've adjusted the size of the symbol, so just showing some possibilities there. And then here I use this symbol, this T symbol here is what I use for guy wires, and I'm just rotating it at pretty small degrees of incrementing here. So you can do it actually in 1 degree increments, so it gets to be very precise as far as the rotation goes. So that about covers all of the basic Esri functionality that's out of the box that I wanted to demonstrate for you today. Obviously I've only just touched the surface of what's possible, but at least this will give you an idea of some of the things that can be done, and there's a lot more to explore and a lot more that can occur. They have a lot of educational materials that you can take a look at, as well as classes and certifications and things, so you can get more familiar with Esri. And really most of what you saw today is pretty easy to learn. It didn't take me very long to learn, and it's something that you could pretty easily learn as well.